Hi, I'm Bruce Pattinson from the Total Education Centre. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture, and don't forget that these lectures are brought to you free. So if you give us a like, that'd be great, and don't forget, if you have any questions or any queries, click on the button below, write me a question, and we'll surely get back to you as quickly as possible. Don't forget, if you're a subscriber to our channel, you can get to select the videos that you want to have made, and if you really need some extra help, don't forget, go to our website, because on the website you have all the student notes and teacher notes for the topics that I'm lecturing on. These lectures are only in addition to those, and they'll give you all the detail that you require to do well in your studies. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy the video. Hi, I'm Bruce Pattinson. Today I want to talk about the art of travel and some questions from students that have sent me about problems they've had with the art of travel or things that might need some assistance. The first question comes from Nikisha, and it says, is there any particular theme or argument that is recommended that you approach the essay in that way? Now, is there any theme or argument? Well, the theme or argument that you'll be looking at, particularly for the art of travel in this one, is people and the environment. So our whole focus is people and landscape, and how people interact and adapt with that landscape. So there are a number of approaches you can take. You can approach it, and some students approach it from interior type of landscape and external landscape, or there's a different way of approaching it I'd like to take, which is the sort of lockstep approach, which was there's a physical aspect to landscape and people, there's an emotional aspect to people and landscapes, and there's certainly an imaginative approach to people and landscapes. And you can look at the three different areas of the text in those ways, or take that internal-external approach. It doesn't really matter what approach you take, as long as you're supporting your ideas with evidence from the text and backing it up. So I think that's probably the best way to look at it, the best place to start, and find examples that go with those and support your ideas following those pretty simple lock steps. The second question is, how would you recommend HSC students structure an art of travel essay? Well, the basic structures are very similar, and in this case you must remember that you're looking at related material. Now, some students approach the essay by talking about the art of travel for the first half of the essay and their related material for the second half of the essay, and that's a good approach if you want to take that approach, and it's a nice simple way of doing the essay. I prefer, and I try and teach, that students integrate the work through the essay. So for example, you might have a point, your first point might be looking at the imaginative landscapes that Dupont talks about in the text, and what you'll do is you'll look at that in his text, and you'll look at that in your related material, and link the two ideas together so the essay flows very clearly and thoroughly. I like that approach because you can integrate your ideas, you sort of develop your own ideas better, and it links in your related material without making your essay blocky. Both essays are just as effective in the HSC, it just depends on which one you prefer and the way you want to approach the essay. If you look at my question and think back to my answer to question 1, where you're looking at those different areas, you can start your essay by doing that and working all your related material and your text into that with full examples. And that's the way I'd approach that essay. Our third question is, if you are talking about travel in an emotional sense, how emotions affect our experiences, how do you relate it to landscapes in a sophisticated manner? When we're talking about landscapes and the effect of landscapes on the human emotion, there are many examples in Alain de Botton's book. And what you'd do is you'd pull a specific example and look at how that affected emotion in that sense. You could use, for example, when he goes to the desert and he looks at the majesty and grandeur of the landscape and how it makes you, the smallness and insignificance of man against nature. A simple example like that can show the detail of emotion. And Dupont describes lots of emotions in the text as he travels. You could also use when he goes to Barbados and the disappointment of Barbados in comparison to the picture that he sees, to the actual images that he gets when he first arrives in Barbados. Emotions are extremely important when we travel, and we travel for those emotions, and the expectation of travel builds the emotions in us, and we either are surprised or disappointed or shocked or whatever emotion that you feel when you arrive at a particular place, or just during the travel to a different place. And I think it's important that we focus, when we look at people and landscapes and the effect that those landscapes have on us, that we look at those emotions, and in particular the depth of those emotions and how they change how we see the world and how we change how we see other people. The trip to Wordsworth's Lakes District, for example, is very, very important in that aspect, and you can see that it affected whole lives in the way he wrote his poetry and everything about the things that Wordsworth did. And for an English teacher like me, that's a really good example of how emotion impacts specifically on landscape, and landscape impacts specifically on people, and how it affects how they do things. So those sorts of examples, you can talk about the sophistication of those and how the language that Dupoton uses converts those into feelings for the reader as well. So that was an excellent question, and thank you for that question. Our fourth question is, what are your most favoured sections of The Art of Travel, and why? Which sections do you recommend best represent the influence of landscapes on people in an articulate manner? Well, it depends on very much on what you like, and I know that's an old sort of cliched answer, but everybody who reads that book has a particular section that they prefer over every other section, and I think you should use those sections. But what I would recommend that you do is you take one from the beginning of the text, one from the middle of the text, and one from the end of the text, so that you have a wide reading. In a specific answer, probably I like the Hopper section, in particular where he talks about people in a crowded space feeling extremely isolated, and I love those pictures, and I love the way he's put that chapter together. And I certainly would use that as an example if I was writing an essay in the HSC. I really like the way that the images and the words link together, and he uses that whole section to build a feeling and an emotion in both the reader, and the artist's link to that is particularly important for me. I really like that section. How do you respond to that? You use words and you use your ideas and make sure that they flow together and that they combine together in an articulate way. And what you're doing is presenting an argument. So the argument or the thesis that you have when you begin your essay and use your introductory section, you need to continue that all through those, and that will make your essay sophisticated and articulate, as well as the language and the language techniques you pick. So when you find your examples, if you're looking for a special type of language technique and a very specific language technique, you'll use an example that gives that from the sections that you're choosing. And I think that's very important to do. Don't forget, when you're writing your essay on The Art of Travel, to make sure that you give your example, you look at the language technique and you say the effect of that technique both on the author, for example, and the reader in this instance. And that will link back to your emotional sense when you do the text. Our final question is, when discussing emotional landscapes, is it best to reference specific emotions? And I think it is best to reference specific emotions, because what Dupoton does in his language techniques is he develops and works on building specific emotions not only in himself but also in the reader. It's particularly important to think about what emotion and how he creates that emotion, and that comes through language techniques. So really, this question is going to sort of morph into a discussion on language techniques and what sort of language techniques that Dupoton uses in the text to help convey his messages. Well, the first, probably and most significant one, is he uses anecdote. An anecdote's specifically important in that he tells little stories to build a sense of affection with the reader and an attachment to himself. So he builds that empathy and a link with the reader so that he can convey his more philosophical ideas in a very close and detailed way. His specific emotional sense is developed through, obviously, a series of language techniques. And we've just had a collision here in the wind, but that's okay, I'm going to continue on anyway. We've got an amazing sense of, an amazing array of language techniques, and those language techniques, after anecdote, can be broken up into much smaller pieces, and we have things like enumeration and listing. We've got comparison and contrast, we've got cause and effect, we've got problems and solutions, and that's especially important in travel, and you might want to look for that one specifically. He sort of creates a problem with travel, and then he has a specific solution to that problem, and that causes an emotional tension in the text that's very interesting, as well as his more philosophical ideas. There's statistics used, there's structure and format, very different ways. He goes into historical detail, he tells little biographies of people and little stories about their lives. Look at the way he uses language and the choice of words that he uses. Some areas are very colloquial and other are very formulaic. Others are more philosophical, others have specific references to text and the use of very specific words that relate to that character. And that's a really interesting way to look at it specifically. He uses lots of data, lots of facts, the use of authority figures, and I think you need to look for those. And all those things can be found in your very specific section, and use those terms in your essay, and that will help you do that. As I've said, artworks and photographs are very important, and you need to mention the artworks and the photographs when you do that. And I think that's very specifically important because he includes those for a very particular reason, and you need to make reference to those. I've talked about capsule biography before, but look at things like the normal techniques like repetition and use of all those sorts of language techniques, and I think that helps you. And all those build in the three senses we've talked about in the other answers to look at questions and very specific responses to the question. You can include all those things, and if you go back to my answer to question 1, that's how you structure your essay and work it through in that particular way. I think that's all the questions that we have at this particular time. If you have any further questions, don't forget to add it. Just give me a line on the end of this video and drop me a little note. Hi, I'm Bruce Pattinson, Total Education Centre. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.